You're listening to Beat Autoimmune and Thrive, the podcast all about reversing and preventing autoimmune conditions so you can live your most vibrant life as soon as possible. We talk about autoimmune root causes, actionable solutions, and inspirational healing stories. I'm Palmer Kippola, and I used to have MS. Today, I'm an author, a speaker, a functional medicine certified health coach, a pickleball player, and nature lover who's helped thousands of people reclaim their health and their best lives. Let's dive into this episode. Welcome. I am thrilled that Dr. Susan Blum is with me today. Dr. Blum is a medical doctor. She's got her master's in public health. She's a preventive medicine and chronic disease specialist and an early adopter of functional medicine. She's the founder and director of the Blum Center for Health in Rye Brook, New York. She's also clinical professor at the Department of Environmental Medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She is a member of the medical advisory board for the Dr. Oz Show, and she's senior teaching faculty with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. Her books include Healing Arthritis, Your 3-Step Guide to Conquering Arthritis Naturally, and the Immune System Recovery Plan, a doctor's 4-step program to treat autoimmune disease, right over my shoulder. Welcome, Dr. Blum. It is an honor to have you with me.
It's great to see you again.
It's really nice for you to be here. So in addition to your long and impressive list of accomplishments, I love that you practice what you preach. You've got your own healing journey of overcoming Hashimoto's, which I share in my book, Beat Autoimmune. In fact, if you have the paperback, it's on page 192, so you get more details there. And more recently, you overcame arthritis by following your own advice, which is both amazing and inspirational to the rest of us. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yep.
So
well, you know how that goes. It's really, as you speak, and I know you have had the opportunity to speak to a lot of integrative people, we all sort of learn on ourselves, don't we?
We do. That is generally the starting place for doctors, in particular, medical doctors. You were trained as a conventional medical doctor, and eventually you found functional medicine, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And your path to finding functional medicine was in part due to having your own story. And I want to dig into your story because you have a terrific background in the sense that you addressed a profound amount of stress in your life. Yeah. And that was in part your way out, your recovery from these autoimmune conditions. So I want to dig straight in, and you share that contributing to the eventual Hashimoto's diagnosis was childhood stress and the fact that you became the perfect one, I'll use in air quotes, in your family. Can you talk a little bit about the setup of why you decided to become what you call an A+ student?
Oh gosh, you and I were joking about this before we got started, that I don't remember that this is something you and I really talked more about. I think I spoke to you more about this than in other interviews I've done when I think about my childhood. But look, I think we're all, I like to say that we're each born into a family, and the family is like a play, right? We all choose, whatever, you could decide what you believe about choosing your family or what, but in either case, I think of our family environment and the different siblings and the parents almost like a play. And every member of the family is like takes a role, right? And is like a different actor in the play. And I think we work out a lot of for the rest of your life, I think you're working out like the dynamic of that family of origin stuff. And so my role in my family, my role in the play was I was the perfect one. And one of the reasons that happened for me, I believe, is because, I had a very angry father who would chase my sister around the table with a belt. And when the screaming would happen, I hid, And so my way of staying under the radar, I needed to be the good one, right? So I was the second of 4 kids, so I needed to be the good one. And so I just did everything I could to make my parents happy so that they wouldn't, I wouldn't get the wrath, of my father. And And so I think I just saw at an early age that the best way to, you know, the best way to make my parents happy was to just bring home A's. And then I had a narcissistic mother who really, you know, as long as I reflected back to her something great, then she was happy. And so she drove all her ambition into me. And so the combination of those two things, you know, my mother was a product of the 60s and 70s. You know, she sort of missed out on women's lib. And I think she wishes, because she was born in 58. So she came right before the 60s. And I know that she wishes she could have done more. And so I think she channeled that into me as well. So, I mean, those are the factors I know sort of drove me there. And it's a big burden to carry, to be perfect all the time. And with everything going around, I was the fixer in my family. So I was always trying to smooth things over. And, you know, everyone tried to blame everyone all the time. So anyway, there's a lot of dysfunction in my family. And you know what? Being what I do, and I interview people every day, you know, I'm a clinician. I still have a very busy medical practice, and I see new patients. I hear people's stories, and I'm not alone in this, okay? There's trauma everywhere. And certainly my work with the Center for Mind Body Medicine has allowed me to really spend a lot of time working with people with trauma. So not only do I see it and I can relate to it, you know, in my patients every day, as well as the mind-body groups, or even the work I do at the Center for Mind Body Medicine. And I really, I'm very aware that I have a lot of compassion for every single person, because I really believe we all have this family of origin stuff that informs us through our lives. And I think the work is learning more about yourself and undoing some of that.
Oh, so beautifully said. I think every single person listening can relate to this, because we have all had trauma to one varying degree or another. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
Every single person. And one could say that folks with the autoimmune diagnosis or mysterious symptoms may have more than their fair share, because we know of the profound connection between childhood stress and the eventual, the advent of autoimmunity years later.
And right. You mean like the ACEs, like the adverse childhood
like the ACEs research, really,
Absolutely.
really profound and important stuff. And I think, but the personality that we become, that's often shaped by what happens in our lives growing up. I had a similar situation with my father that has helped to create who I am today. Right.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
And I love that you have this driven personality, and you also have this big desire to help people. And it was no surprise that you wanted to become a doctor. So that was a big deal that you went off to medical school. And when you went to medical school and you started practicing conventional medicine, you also were raising a family at the same time. And that was a big amount of stress to shoulder. So you talk about a confluence of events that happened to cause you to really examine the stress in your life. And I'd love to know more about that. Like, what got you to the breaking point where you needed to really address stress in your life?
Well, I think, I can say I learned to meditate when I was around 35. My cousin, I think it was just, I was in my early 30s, actually. I had kids. I was trying to figure out, I think I just woke up one day and realized I was really unhappy. And I didn't know why. I was married. I had 2 kids. And I have a wonderful cousin. You know, we all have angels in our world. And there's always, when the student's ready, the teacher comes, as they say. Mm-hmm. And some is my husband's first cousin, actually, is like a Zen Buddhist meditator person who I was really close with. And I just realized I was unhappy. And so she taught me how to meditate. She started teaching me how to meditate. And I started therapy, actually, to try to figure out, like, why am I unhappy? And like most women, or a lot of women I speak to, I first thought it was my husband and I was going to have to get rid of him, which, by the way, I haven't. He's still with me. But we originally think like we're going to find external happiness through other people. When the fact was that I needed to do some digging in to figure out for myself, why I was unhappy. And so when I was 38, so in my early 30s, I started meditating, and I actually started therapy, and probably even therapy with my husband. But and when I was 38, I crossed my desk. And so here's the thing. knowing ourselves is really important, and trusting your intuition is really important. And so across my desk came this brochure for the Center for Mind Body Medicine Professional Training Program for Health Professionals. And I looked at this and I thought, I gotta go. And I don't know why. I had never done mind body medicine before. I had only just was trying to learn to meditate from my cousin. That was really the only integrative stuff I had done. I had, at that point, I had 3 little children. I was on a break from working because I had just had my 3rd kid, and I thought I was overwhelmed and I just needed to take a break because I was at Mount Sinai doing preventive medicine, which I loved, but it was conventional, and I didn't see what I was going to do with that. And so I took a break. And then across my desk comes this thing. And I went, and for me, that changed my life. Because at that training, I spent, now it's only 4 or 5 days when you do the training, but then it was 8 days. I left my family for the first time. I left everyone and I disappeared. I mean, you go into those trainings. I don't know if you've ever been to an intensive sort of mind body or an intensive training where you're doing all this work on yourself, a lot of mindfulness and mind body techniques. And it was the first time I left home for that long and didn't even call everyone every day because I was so overwhelmed with my own work that I was doing. But the between drawings and writing and journaling and movement and different kinds of visualization and guided imagery and biofeedback, and it was a group process, and I was practicing all these things. It really broke me open, and I learned a lot about myself. And through that work that I continued, I was able to really figure out why I was unhappy, what I needed to do to move towards being happier. And it was really about me, myself, and I, And so what I like to say is that process, or doing that program, it enabled me to discover and connect with my North Star. Mm-hmm. Whatever you want to call your intuition, your intuitive voice, that part of you that knows. I was able to finally hear and connect with that part of me that I could check in with and ask questions and know what's the next step. Find my North Star. What's going to be what's going to help guide me, as I'm now moving through life. And life is a series of decisions. We have choice all the time. So it's what's the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and where do you want to set your intention, and where do you want to head, and what's your calling, and what's your purpose. And, those answers are within you, but we need to cultivate techniques and different ways to hear that voice. And with the busyness and the noise and world and everything going on, that you don't have the opportunity to get quiet, and to find a way to hear that voice. And so for the first time, I really heard my voice, and I was able to ask questions and process and develop skills that I still practice to this day in an ongoing way, to always be able to hear that voice. And that's the only way we're going to navigate life in the truest way that's aligned with our purpose and that allows us to stay happy.
So beautiful. You mentioned a couple things there that I want to touch on. One was the fact that it broke you open. And I love that metaphor because it's just kind of like when we drop everything. And one of the things that you came out of that experience with, that you shared in another interview with me, is that you decided that you weren't going to be the perfect one anymore. And you went home and you told your family, guys, I do not look to me to be the perfect one in the family anymore. And I love that because not only did you come up with that decision at this retreat, and sometimes, I've done retreats where you do have these powerful aha moments, but then you get back to your daily life, and it starts to fade, like the honeymoon effect, right?
Right.
But you went back and you literally told people, look, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
So what happened with that?
Yeah, well, and I do want to say that what's happened over the years with the Center for Mind Body Medicine is because it is hard to have one training like that last a lifetime and to keep you going. You always have to have a way to keep practicing would check back in and renew your vows and renew your vows and renew your vows. And so I continued working with the center. And so all the friends that I made and my colleagues, they were all like in charge of everything now. They're like running everything. We started together 20 years ago, and we're all faculty, and I go to train and I teach the groups now that I was participating in, but I stayed and I trained and I got certified and I became faculty. And so I kept every year, a couple times a year, I would be in one of these groups that I was in. And so if I was leading it, I still got to participate. And so I was able to keep my toe in that water. And I think that in an ongoing way, as people are listening to this conversation, I think it's really important that you can't just go to one retreat and think that, the effects are going to last forever. You have to have something that you do in an ongoing way. And for me, in addition to an ongoing meditation practice or other ways that I do a daily practice, I also annually make sure I do a retreat kind of thing. Like everybody needs to figure out what they need to do. But those years, I was like, I stayed very involved with the center and continued to get together with that group as a way and to practice together. So I kept it going, and that was really important for me. Coming home, many years ago, in those early years of therapy and all that, there was a book, I forget the name of the book, but it might be The Dance of Anger or something. It was one of those early therapy books. Mm-hmm. But what stuck with me is that they talked about the family dance. And for anybody who's a psychologist out there, anybody that's familiar with that term, what it means to me, because I'm not a therapist, but what it means to me is that and what I took from that is when one member of the family changes the dance, everybody else dances differently. And so, but the person who's changing the dance, it's not easy, right? So it was really a struggle. I had to, my telling everyone I'm not perfect is one thing, but it required vigilance and in an ongoing way for me at each time when I felt myself trying to fix things or to live up to some expectation someone had of me, to remind them, I'm not perfect, not going to do that, kind of thing. And so, and in a way it was things like making sure I paid even all the bills on time. And like, I was in charge of all that. And it's like, you know what, if I forgot to call someone back, I forgot to call them back. And I'm too overwhelmed. I can't get all that done. And you know what, I won't get it all done on time, and people will just have to understand. And there were days like that. And so letting go of that need to really function. It's not even about being perfect. It's also about functioning at such a high level and getting and not disappointing anyone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I made that very clear to my family of origin. And so they got used to the new me. And but it required me to stay vigilant. And that's where mindfulness comes in. Because at any given moment, if you're unconscious and you're not paying attention, you'll default back into your old ways. And so you have to keep practicing mindfulness, because all mindfulness means is having an awareness moment to moment about what's happening. And so as triggers, and I was just talking to a patient about this today, actually, about this idea about triggers. And the trigger, we all have triggers, and there's perhaps an innate automatic reaction that's an old way of doing things that maybe wants to happen. But if you're mindful and you see it coming up, you can stop it before you actually, those words come out of your mouth that you behave a certain way in response to someone else. So without that vigilance and without the ongoing mindfulness practice, it's very hard to maintain a way of being that you might have set an intention that you want to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. It really, really makes sense. And there was another nugget that you mentioned in the previous comment, that you got quiet.
Yes.
And this is something that I am finding to be difficult for people that have experienced trauma or stress in their lives, is the ability to just sit. Yes. I think a lot of people would prefer to distract, and we know there are unhealthy ways of coping and distracting ourselves, and there are healthy ways of distracting ourselves. But there is this ongoing tendency I find for people, in particular, a lot of women that I work with autoimmune conditions, and men too. But the majority of people with autoimmunity are women, so that's why
the majority of people that seek out help are women.
There you are.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 for me. There is kind of a desire to sweep, they're aware that it's there, but there's a preference to sweep things under the rug. And if I sit, I might cry. Or talk to me about just sitting, or what you advise to people that are not comfortable with just sitting. Is there a way to ease into it, or, is the only way to get to the other side to go through it?
Couple of thoughts about that. The first thing I want to say is that for people that have experienced a lot of trauma, sitting is not even always the best way to start. People that have experienced trauma often need some sort of movement to move the emotion. When there's strong emotion, movement can be more helpful. The other thing is that when there's a lot of trauma, it's very hard to ask someone to get quiet and have these things when they're all by themselves at home might be really asking a lot. And so, and this is where Jim's new book, the transformation, Jim Gordon just wrote the new book, which is all about the trauma and transformation. And he explains all of this because in the mind body groups that the center runs, and I'm not promoting myself here by talking about it. People can go to the website cmbm.org and you can sign up for an online mind body group. And that's why trauma, there's a whole other way of working with trauma, and you really are best doing that with someone if you have a lot of trauma. So I don't want to take away. I'm going to come back and talk about meditation and the way to get started. But really, for those people that really feel afraid or agitated, if they're getting quiet and they are afraid of what might come up with the feelings, you shouldn't be doing it alone necessarily. And this is where, I have to say that, I've had tough times in my life and traumatic things happen, and I've done EMDR, like great therapists, somatic experience work, which is like mind body, stop and breathe as you're talking about difficult things. EMDR, to help discharge some of the energy around things. Find a therapist, So therapists, there are certain really great mind body therapists that they're called somatic experience, where they really help you with the body mind piece. But you might need someone. Okay, so I just want to say that first. And the way we work with trauma at the center is with a lot of shaking and dancing and movement, right? Because sometimes you can't sit because there's just too much in there and it's hard. And so when I said that I got quiet during my first retreat, it wasn't all at all. There's actually very little sitting meditation. I mean, we did opening and closing soft belly breathing, like at the large sessions in the beginning and end of the groups. But the exercises were not quiet necessarily, right? So the breaking open and the getting quiet and hearing my voice as the world dropped away when you go into retreat, the exercises are meant to connect you, right? So there's drawings, there's journaling, there's like I said, there's movement, there's biofeedback, there's guided visualization. So it's not quiet necessarily. You might just do a body scan where you go head to toe and you just sort of see where your body's holding something and you bring your attention there. And there's just all sorts of interesting ways to connect you with your deeper self. And so quiet is hard. And so that's why, I originally learned to meditate Zen, mindfulness, meditation, Vipassana. I actually like the quiet part. But I've been practicing a long time. So I do enjoy that. And there are people who end up there and really like it, but you don't have to start there at all. The more hard it is for you to sit, I will prescribe something moving. There's like the Sufi meditators, they do whirling, like there's movement, there's shaking and there's chaotic breathing. And in yoga, they do pranayama. Like there's different kinds of meditations that are more active. And so for people once people practice that for a little while, sometimes then they can sit. There's a lot of great apps now with, you just plug in and listen to someone's voice. So it's a lot easier. You feel like you're not alone and you have someone guiding you. So that's a long answer for your question, but I hope I sort of addressed that. Getting quiet I think it freaks people out thinking that they have to get quiet. And so I just want to say that, and even me, so I meditate, it's not quiet. My mind is always but I'm noticing it. I'm noticing it. Sometimes I feel it. Sometimes I set a 20-minute timer every morning and I sit. And sometimes it's really noisy and sometimes it's a little less noisy. But like the thought that we actually get quiet is probably causes the intimidation that people feel, because it's not really like that. It's about learning how your mind works and getting to know yourself. When you're focusing on your breath and you're getting a break from the incoming from the outside world, that's what allows you to experience the deeper connection with yourself as you sort of move away from the external stimulation.
I think that is so well said. I think that by and large, most of us are overstimulated today, right? I mean, we have the constant news cycles. We've got families, we've got work, we've got illness. All of this creates more stress.
Yeah.
And I think most people are dealing with reaction. And I spoke with Heidi Hanna, who is the executive director of stress.org. And
I know Heidi. Yep.
You know Heidi?
Mm-hmm.
And she is looking to rebrand the concept of the stress response to the stress reaction, because it really is more appropriately a reaction that we're having. We don't need to do anything to elicit the stress response, right? We don't need to do anything. It automatically happens, but the relaxation response by counterbalance requires proactive effort. So I think that
I think we can short circuit our stress reaction.
Okay.
And that's really where, with practice, you can catch yourself. If, the trigger comes and you could not have that stress reaction. And I think that's where the mindfulness comes in. Because, it's like, in a way, if you think about a baseline or where's your baseline? Some people are already up here, and so then a trigger comes and they're like over the top right away. But with an ongoing sort of cultivating this sort of mindfulness or this, by practicing some sort of engaging your relaxation system every day, you can keep your baseline down here. And so you definitely notice when you flip up really high. It's more obvious. Whereas if your baseline's here and you're flipping up, you might not know. It's like you're always wired up here,
That's right.
And so if you can bring your baseline down here, it'll be much easier for you to have that awareness when you get triggered, because it's such a big change, right? And so I think
love that. I love the visual of that, because I can really see it's like the temperature is rising, right?
Right. And then if you go over the top, it's only like you might not even know it's happening because you're living up here.
That's right.
The idea is to help yourself live down here.
Yeah.
And you can do that by engaging relaxation response every day. And you need to find some way of doing that. I mean, listen, I tell people, we both know how hard it is, how much resistance there is, right? Everyone knows. And, I was giving a talk to a group of 300 health professionals about 3 or 4 years ago. And I said to everyone in the audience, so who here knows that stress is really important and for your health? And that, who here knows that? Every single person raised their hand. And then my next question was, okay, so who here is actually doing something about it and practicing some mindfulness or some way to make sure that stress doesn't come into your body and make you sick? And only about 20% of people raised their hands. And these are health professionals like me in an integrative conference, so we all know. And so the question is, how do you do work with yourself in an everyday ongoing way, to make sure that you protect yourself? It's like your bulletproof vest, right? How do you put on that vest and to protect yourself from the incoming, And so I think that we just all have to find a way. And so I tell people, go for a walk without your phone. Listen to music. Put on music and dance before you take a shower. Take up knitting. Read a stupid book. Lay out. Just turn everything off and read a dirty novel. I don't know. But we have to find times where we disconnect, and it doesn't have to be. The meditation piece or the mindfulness exercises are really good for self-awareness. So you get to that quiet place to find that North Star. And so I think that's really important. There's two benefits for doing some sort of mindfulness practice. It's so you can, connect inside and hear your inner voice and your intuition. And then there's the health, right? The engaged parasympathetic, turn off the stress reaction so that your organs don't get sick, And so you can do that. That you can do by knitting and by painting and by the physical thing, engaging relaxation. You can do that with a lot of different kinds of exercises, things you do, relaxation, go for a walk in the woods, leave your phone home, right? Play with your dog, throw a ball, all these things create joy and turn off the stress response. But the connecting inside and that whole self-awareness, intuition, and if you're looking for like trying to understand yourself and to navigate life and what's next and setting an intention for, designing your life and what you want next. And those are self-awareness practices. And that's where meditation really comes in nice. And you can do guided visualizations. You could do apps, Calm or Headspace. They all have really good kind of guided visualizations. But, that's the second purpose for doing it. And that's separate from the relaxation response. That's self-awareness. And I think for people looking for joy and to find that happiness and to find their path, you can't not do this. I mean, no one else is going to tell you. You have the answers inside you. So you have to find a way to connect with your North Star. No other way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you say, and you talked about, and I think I shared in the book, that this is our jobs. This is our job to prevent stress from coming in and harming us. Yeah. And I think that's so beautifully said about developing the self-awareness. No one is going to come and do it for you. No one is coming to save us. This is our opportunity to do this for ourselves. But there's so many paths in. And that's what's exciting about this, is that there's not one right way. So it causes me to wonder, when you work with your patients, when do you address, and I assume that most people with autoimmune disorders have some form of dysregulated nervous system, right? When do you address this particular topic of finding some way of beginning to regulate the nervous system?
Well, I actually don't ever not talk about it. So, at the initial visit, it's always a discussion. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about your stressors. Let's talk about how you handle them. And most people that come to see me, especially, autoimmune people, most autoimmune people know there's this gut autoimmune connection, right, with the gut microbiome. And the number one and the number two most important influences on the microbiome are food and stress, right? So what you eat and the stress reaction, we can call it. Stress reaction bathes your microbiome in cortisol and adrenaline, and it affects your motility, and it affects how much digestive enzymes you make, and so your digestion gets worse, your motility gets worse. You can end up with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and dysbiosis and leaky gut. Even if you don't have symptoms, all these things are associated with autoimmunity. And so you might have no digestive symptoms, but if you have a lot of stress, and it comes in and it ends up in your gut. And I had stomach aches my whole life. I was a gut person, 100%. And so I always try to flush out who's my gut people, and so you find out who had stomach aches when they were kids. But inevitably my goal is always to help make that connection for people, so stress, I always do a stress history, and everyone has one, divorce, remarriage, juggling of blended family, a kid who, had mental health issues in college, anxiety. Everyone's got anxiety now. The kids, everyone is very stressed. So I do a stress history on every single person, and I track it. I have a really good EMR system. I just take really good notes, and at each visit, it's always something. How are you doing with that? Because I make a plan. And so, but my question for people is always, so what do you think you can do? Let's just talk about it, because nobody wants to be judged or made to feel bad because they couldn't figure out a way to meditate. That's not the way to help somebody, right? And so for me, it's really just, I try to, especially the first visit or, in the first couple of visits, was really to assess how the body's doing, how the stress system's doing. So I'm always checking adrenals and the stress system. But the stress history, I take a very thorough stress history, and I try to help people make their own connection.
Yeah.
Look at how your symptoms were affected by your stress. Look at how that changed. And so I really think educating people and helping them see how stress affected them is very motivating. And so the first thing I do then in the first couple of, as I'm getting to know someone, certainly the first visit and then the first follow-up after I get testing back, is try to take all the results and the history as I understood it and tell them their story back about how it all sort of, how I think they got here, right? And so, and the role that stress had to play in it, as well as the role their diet might have had to play and the different events in their lives. Every single person has stressful events. And when you start putting the timeline together, it's fascinating. The year after my mother had cancer and died, that's when my autoimmune condition came. Or, I ended up in the hospital with pneumonia, and I had all these antibiotics, and then my gut was a mess, and then I had autoimmune. There's a timeline. So being a detective is sort of fun, in that I put together, it's a story. I spent 2 hours my initial visit. So really putting the story together, and stress is always part of the story. And so helping explain that to somebody is extraordinarily powerful, because it really is motivating then about, oh my gosh, look at that connection. I need to do something about it. I mean, I don't want that to happen again. And so that's when then we talk about what that looks like. And sometimes it's really just about sleep, and a bedtime and a schedule and preventive scheduling. Don't overdo your day. Don't schedule that extra meeting. And different ways people might set an intention for how they structure their life. And maybe they decide to leave the city and move to a country house, and then, like you said, where you're living, your closest neighbors are the deer, people might get motivated to make a change. So it's not just about meditating. It's about really understanding where all those stressors have come in. And, we can't change, our parents are going to get sick and die, and so will we, and people we love, and there's a lot of loss and grief in life, and so we all have to find our way to how we're going to manage that.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it in my office. So I'm fearless in my talking about this with people, and I think that that's important for anyone listening, any health provider that you see, because I've done so much of my own work and so much trauma work. I sit and I cry with people. Emotions okay. I try to offer this as a safe place. It's a safe place where you can really talk about these things. And I think giving people permission to really explore it with me, or, and to make those connections are really important. And then we talk about what to do about it.
Yeah. And what are people willing to do, or what can they do? And
right. And that's
baby
the
steps
question.
are fine.
And baby steps are fine. Right. And I very rarely use the M word. Most people don't want to hear about meditation.
Yeah.
But there's a million other things you could do.
Right. So let's talk about the things in terms of you, because you've got a thriving practice today. You're helping a ton of people. You're writing your books, which are fantastic. I've got the arthritis book is on my Kindle. That's why it's not behind me. And you've got an online program. You're serving more and more people globally. Yes. So I know you've got a meditation practice. You do your 20 minutes in the morning. What else do you do to keep stress from coming into your environment? You don't want to get sick again. You've been there, you've done that. Not going to let that happen again. What else do you do, mind, body, spirit, to take care of yourself?
So, I think the meditation practice is sort of that anchor. I walk a lot with the dog without a phone, right? And I do a lot of nature. So I'm out in nature a lot. During the pandemic, I've actually decided I'm working 4 days a week. So I've changed my schedule, really being mindful of my schedule. Mm-hmm. Certainly when everything changed, it was a lot of stress, and that was hard. So I set a bedtime, and if I look at the clock, and if it's 10:30 is coming, I'm like, get to bed, make yourself go. And so making sure I sleep. So sleep is really, really important. Minimum of 7 hours a night. I sleep really good. Sometimes I need melatonin at night, but whatever you need to do, a person needs to do to make sure they're sleeping. I think sleep is probably one of the most powerful things you could do to protect your adrenals and your resiliency to stress. So making sure I sleep is really important. We're power sleepers in my house. So setting a bedtime and sticking to it, limiting caffeine. I have 1 cup of something in the morning. I'm an espresso girl, but it's just 1 little espresso, and I don't drink too much coffee the rest of the day. And I think all these little things add up. I don't eat sugar. I'm a vegan, pretty much. I eat fish a couple of days, maybe 1 day a week. But mostly my whole house is vegan, actually. And so just eating really nutritious, plant-based diet. And these are all ways I take care of myself. So there's self-care that's more than just meditation, right? And so it's
That's
a whole
right.
lifestyle piece. So it's sleep, it's food. I don't drink. I have a glass of wine 2 nights a week, one each night. That's like it. When the weekend comes, it's like, yes, I can have a glass of wine. Because other than that, otherwise I don't feel good the next day. I don't sleep good, and then it affects my sleep. And so I'm very careful about just everything, my whole environment that I bathe my body in. So whether it's food and drink, sleep, exercise, make sure I exercise, and doing yoga and walking. I have a very hilly area. I'm up and down the hills. And and then there's meditation and preventive, and really be mindful of my schedule, not to overwork myself, and figuring out how to delegate and not be perfect, right? So I didn't get that done today. So what? And you can't get stressed out about everything. When you've been through tough stuff, which I definitely have, you learn what's important. And so, you know what? Didn't get that done today. It'll get done tomorrow, and it's really okay. And I think we all have to find that ease somewhere. And so that's how I take care of myself. And of course I'm older, right? I just had a big birthday. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but, perspective changes as you get older. And so I'm definitely working on not letting myself have that stress reaction. But a lot of it is setting an intention about how you set up your life. Right.
Yeah.
I'm in my office, right? So pandemic, I have 5 people in my house. During the pandemic, I'm in the country, so it's been lovely in a way. But, oh, man, I needed to get out of my house. So I started coming into the office, and so I'm doing my telemedicine patient visits in my office a couple of days a week, and then I'm working from home the other days. But I couldn't take it. I need a break from my house. And so figuring out what I need is what I've been doing. And that's all good for my mental health. It's all good for stress. It's not just one thing.
It's so empowering, because when you fill yourself up, when you take care of yourself and do the things that you need to do, and as they say, put that proverbial oxygen mask on first, then everything else is easier. And I love the word that you used of ease, because it just makes me feel good when you hear the word ease, doesn't it? I mean, that is just we all have to find our own path to ease. Right. No one is going to create your schedule for you. We all have things that we wish were not happening or going on. We are all going to be facing, the stuff of life, those stressors that we can't avoid, but it's how we handle them and how we maybe shift our perceptions of them. And I just love that you've given all these tools and the connection to the Center for Mind Body Medicine, which I really would invite people to go check out, as well as your own website, which is blumcenterforhealth.com. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right.
I do want to say that, I'm sure I'll have a chance to say this later, but when you were talking about all the different things I'm doing, one of the things for my book, the Immune System Recovery Plan, I have been doing an annual autoimmune program every fall, an online program, which is a coaching. I have a fantastic health coach. I teach the classes, and she teaches the group, and she leads the coaching groups. And so we do this really great interactive coaching and live classes taught by me every fall. And because of the pandemic, I'm actually redoing it. I'm revamping the whole thing, and I'm calling it Immune System Strong instead of, the immune program, the immune challenge, which I've been doing. And I'm just going to really do a great 8-week course on what the immune system is and how it functions, and lifestyle changes you can make, and the importance of having a healthy immune system. What does it need to be healthy? To really create that resiliency for viruses because what can we do? The pandemic is not going so well. And so all we have to be able to shift from that place of fear to a place of feeling a little more hopeful, we have to empower ourselves to protect ourselves as best we can. And so I think really focusing on how to have a really well-functioning immune system that can protect you from viruses, whether you're autoimmune or just everybody. I'll address, I'll talk to both groups, as we do it, but I'm expanding it to really include everybody because, so I'm really excited about that. I'm in the middle of redoing the guidebooks and the class. I'm really working on changing the curriculum to expand it just for the whole immune system and for everybody. So that's going to be coming in September. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in that, to come to my website. Yeah. And you can just, as long as you're on one of our newsletters, just sign up and join my mailing list, and you will get notified when that's open.
Got it. And that's Blum, BLUM, centerforhealth.com.
Yes.
Just so everybody has the spelling. Okay, great. So you have shared so much. This has been amazing. And I wondered, is there anything that I haven't asked you, or do you have parting thoughts? Because you mentioned helping people become more resilient. And I think that's really the holy grail. At the end of the day, I don't think Darwin said it was a survival of the fittest. I think it was about the survival of the most adaptable, right? Or adaptive. I'm not even sure what the right word is, but people who can adapt to these changing situations. That resiliency, the ability to bounce back when we're faced with all of these threats. Do you have any other words of wisdom for us?
I guess what's popping into my head is don't do this alone. You don't need to do this alone. And actually, sometimes you need a buddy. I've had a pandemic buddy. My girlfriend, we've been walking every Saturday morning for 2 hours in Rockefeller Preserve. And so, find a buddy, find someone to help you, because don't do this alone. Join a Mind Body group, find a friend, join an online program, join a group. Like it's hard to do this alone. Get help from someone. We have immune consults at Blum Center. You can just do a one-off little immune consult with somebody here. So it could be someone like a professional, but it could just be your friend. I think that it's so complicated. There's parts of it that's very complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Lifestyle change and lifestyle medicine is, find community. Find a friend, find community, and get the support you need to take those first steps, whatever they are. And you don't need to do this alone. And if you're struggling, if you've been trying to do it alone and you've been finding it difficult, that tells you that you need to find someone. So look at me. When I was 38, nowadays you can't go somewhere for a conference, but you know what? They're all online.
Yeah.
So, I found something, it came across my desk. My intuition said, you got to do that. And so I would encourage you, people to do things like that. Join a class, join an online program, find community, find people, because it's a long road and it's good. I have buddies that have been with me since the beginning at the center. They're my self-awareness buddies, and they've sustained me. So find your people.
Oh, that is such a beautiful way to end this. I love it. Stay connected, stay safe, and this is such an ideal time to support your immune system because, at the end of the day, that's what we have to protect us against any kind of disease, whether it's viral or other toxins. And to get well, we need to do that. So it's just been an honor and a pleasure talking with you. You're so much fun and such a wealth of knowledge and information. Thank you so much for talking with me.
You're very welcome. It was great talking to you too. And I hope that we gave some people some inspiration.
I know that we did. So thank you for having the conversation. I wish you well throughout this entire time, and let's stay in touch, and you take great care of yourself.
You too.
Talk to you soon, I hope.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and if you feel inspired, please leave a quick review so other people can find it too. Now, if you want to beat autoimmune and thrive, make sure you sign up for my free video training at freeautoimmunetraining.com. That's freeautoimmunetraining.com, and watch the first video right away. Take good care. Bye for now.